Hey guys, welcome. Today we are joined by, is it Martin or Martine?
Martin, yeah. Depending on
Martin,
the
all
country you
right.
live in.
Martin, he is the head of growth at Maple and Syrup. So a lot of people in the dojo didn't know if Maple and Syrup were connected, if Syrup was just built on top of Maple. Well, first of all, what is Maple and then what is Syrup?
For sure. Great question. And thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be here. So to start with Maple, that's actually where it all started. And so Maple is an institutional DeFi platform that brings yield to lenders. So as you can see here, those are a couple of the products that we have. Our two flagship products are really blue chip secured lending and high yield secured lending. So the two tiles, the one at the bottom and the one on the left. And those are really over-collateralized lending strategies, right? So blue chip secured is just loans against, Bitcoin and ETH collateral. And then high yield secured can also take other forms of collateral, like SOL, for example.
Oh, do any of these, so I saw on Syrup that some of your loans were collateralized by like PTSUSD, which is really cool. I think that had recently 14% APR, but expires today. Where would an institution be able to collateralize such an exotic asset to borrow against?
For sure. That's a great question. So that would indeed be on Syrup primarily. So on Maple, we keep it a bit more to blue chip collateral. And on Syrup, we have some of the more exotic collateral types as well, like the PT1 as well as LBTC. Obviously, all collateral will still go through our rigorous, review process where we check it for liquidity and the smart contracts and all these things.
So, question for me is I thought that all of the loans were taken out on Maple and that Syrup was just lending. Are you saying that if you wanted to lend PTSUSD, that would be done through Syrup directly?
So we work a bit different than other money markets. So the way we work is that, borrowers that pledge collateral, that collateral is actually sent to institutional custody, right? And we actually issue out loans directly to them. It's not all borrowers are essentially KYC'd. We have loan agreements with them. And you cannot just permissionlessly, deposit an asset into Syrup as a borrower, but you can obviously as a lender.
Okay, so for a borrower to use like LBTC or SUSDS, would they need to go through some like specific means of contacting Syrup, or would they still go through the Maple platform?
Correct. So they would typically apply on the Maple platform as a borrower, and then we would onboard them as a borrower. It's just that, the Syrup and Maple products are completely separated legally, right? So they run fundamentally the same over-collateralized lending strategy, right? And the loans are underwritten by the Maple team. It's just that the Syrup product is offshore, right? It doesn't accept US capital, and it's really just like a regular, DeFi protocol in that sense.
What does it mean that Maple underwrites the loans of Syrup?
Yeah, so we have an in-house credit underwriting team, and all of the borrowers are reviewed, right? So we checked our balance sheets, we checked our financials, we checked our business model, and we approve every borrower individually. And then we issue out all those loans, we negotiate the terms. And that means that we typically get higher interest rates, we get better collateral levels. And then we also underwrite the borrower on their ability to top up collateral, right? So where in Aave, for example, you let's say had $1 million of ETH, you can just post $1 million of ETH and borrow against it, right? But on Maple or Syrup, if you only have $1 million of ETH, like we won't actually issue a loan to you, right? Because we want to make sure that if the collateral value drops, we can still get more collateral from you to get the loan, back to a healthy level.
So basically what this means is that you guys have vetted borrowers who are posting collateral, all different types of collateral, PTSUSD, Bitcoin, LBTC, Lombard, Solana, etc. And you effectively do some due diligence on them. You see like what is their capacity to top up collateral if it's needed. What is their effective credit, and then you lend to them, meaning that all of the SUSD T and Syrup USDC, Syrup USDT is over collateralized, and that is this collateralization ratio here. Now, can you explain this number to people for those who might not understand what collateralization ratio means?
For sure. Yeah, so the collateralization ratio, so here you can see the loans are 90 million, right? And then the collateral actually backing the loans is 133 million.
Which means that I think for every $1 borrowed, there is $1.47 as collateral.
Correct. Yeah, spot on.
Okay, awesome. Now, a couple questions in addition to this. So, Syrup has this thing called Syrup USDC currently. And I think you said that Syrup USDT is coming soon.
Yeah, so Syrup USDT is live as well. So yeah, perfect. Yeah, there you can
Right,
see
but
it.
it's not as composable. That was the thing. It's kind of going to come soon to like Pendle and many other places,
Correct.
which we'll talk about here in a second. So
Correct.
like one thing that I didn't know, and I posted about this kind of like a idiot, I guess is the word for it. I said, man, wouldn't it be so cool if you could lend to Syrup and they would give you a receipt token that you could take around in DeFi and use? And then, a day later, I realized, oh, they already do that. That's why you guys are on Pendle. So when you deposit onto Syrup, you'll get a receipt token. So if you deposited USDC, you'll get Syrup USDC. If you deposit USDT, you'll get Syrup USDT. And you can see there are slightly different rates. Can you explain like why there are different rates between USDC and USDT? I mean, it's less than 1%. It's like 50 bips. But where does that come from?
For sure. That's a great question. So that basically comes from the loan books being separated, right? So if you lend USDC, we will actually also issue out USDC loans to borrowers to keep the asset the same. And if you deposit USDT, then we will also issue out USDT loans to borrowers. So borrowers are always borrowing the same asset as that is supplied by lenders. And, the overall rate in the loan book is just slightly lower on USDT. Over time, that's probably gonna fluctuate a bit, but it should stay relatively similar. So sort of in the range that it's currently in.
So instead of just having a big pile of stablecoins and saying like you can choose whatever stablecoin you want and we'll just convert our stables into what you want, you say if you want to borrow USDC, we're only going to provide you with USDC that has been lent to us. We're not going to convert any USDT. Now,
correct.
Was that decision made from like a risk perspective, or what was the thinking behind doing that?
For sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Indeed, I think it's the one component is that we in the backend sort of launch two different pools, right? So part of it is like an infrastructure limitation, and then the other benefit for users is obviously if one of the stablecoins were to debug, right, then they don't have exposure to the other one because the loans are issued in the same assets. Let's say if all of the loans would be issued in USDT, and something happens there, then folks that supply USDC would obviously be negatively impacted. We don't have any, obviously we think those are very, very safe stablecoins, right? But it's something to consider.
Okay, so thank you. The next bit of metrics here you have is the APY, TVL, and liquidity. TVL seems pretty straightforward. This means that $225.2 million in stablecoins have been lent, which effectively means that a little bit less than half of the total lent stablecoins have been borrowed. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the TVL would count all the deposits as well as the collateral.
So it's the collateral and also the lent assets.
Correct.
So effectively, if you just like added these two numbers together, the collateral plus the loans.
Yeah, almost. Of course, there could be some idle capital, but it's like we typically have a very high utilization rate. So
yeah, I was gonna say it's like 223 million if I added those two numbers together, and you have 225 million. So there's 2 million. It seems that is like idle, and correct. I imagine that's why you have this liquidity number at 2 days. So people could effectively redeem their Syrup USDC or Syrup USDT for the underlying USDC or USDT in approximately 2 days. Now, is that because of that idle capital, or is there some other reserve mechanism that you guys have? How does that work?
For sure. That's a great question. Indeed. So the actual liquidity, so far has been an average of 12 hours, right? We do have an automated withdrawal bot where if the liquidity is available, you'll get serviced your redemption immediately, right? That we deployed a couple of weeks ago. So in reality, we think this is going to be faster than that. However, in the case that there will be a large number of withdrawals, right? Or we have just issued out a large loan and, somebody issues a big withdrawal, it could take maximum up to 30 days. But again, typically it takes, 1 to 2 days. And the reason for that is that we actually issue out loans, right? And those loans all have duration, fixed yield, short-term, open-term loans, and typically 7 to 30-day pull periods.
Well, this actually brings up the next question I have, which is the interest rates are relatively high, right? So on competitors like Morpho, Aave, wherever else, you can typically borrow stables at, I don't know, anywhere between like 5 and 7% right now. There are a lot of confounding factors here. Many yield-bearing stables have pushed up interest rates all around. But you guys are getting like fixed rate between 11.5 and I think the lowest one is like 7% or 7.75%. What is the profile of your borrowers and why are they willing to take on these seemingly slightly higher interest rates?
For sure. That's a great question. So there's a couple of reasons. So the first one is that we have fixed rates, right? So the borrower has a predictable cost of financing, where on chain, to your point, it's typically, lower. However, it could suddenly spike to 11%, but it could also spike to 20%, right? If there's suddenly large demand. And these borrowers, they prefer predictable. That's reason one. Reason two is that we can take native collateral. So as you can see, we can take Bitcoin, we can take Sol, and those are native assets, right? That we take into institutional custody. And
so this isn't like wrap Bitcoin. This is Bitcoin.
Exactly. This is like, Bitcoin, blockchain, Bitcoin. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting.
And that's also preferable for these borrowers, right? So instead of having to wrap it, taking wrapping risk, potentially taxable events, having to put it in a smart contract, they can just send it into institutional custody. So borrowers are willing to pay premium for that. So yeah, those are some of the reasons why borrowers are willing to pay a premium.
And I mean, Michael Saylor just said that institutional custody is better than holding your own Bitcoin. Very controversial recent statement. We don't need to get into the politics of that. But it is interesting that you guys accept native assets. So this is native Solana. It's not like Solana on EVM. This is native Bitcoin. It's not wrap Bitcoin. It's not BTC. That is fascinating. And then Lombard. Now, I also saw, again, PT assets. Do you guys have a like whitelisted set of assets, or do you work on a case-by-case basis depending on what is debtor the right word here, or borrower? What term do you guys use?
Borrower, yeah.
Okay, depending on what the borrower says. So is it the case that a borrower says, hey, I have a big stack of such and such, can I use this? Or do you say, here's our whitelisted set of assets, you guys can use these?
Yes. Yeah, so it's both. So we have a whitelisted set of assets, and that's probably, 95% of our loans. And sometimes borrowers come to us and are like, hey, could I borrow against this asset, right? Mm-hmm. And we're like, okay, you cannot yet. However, let us review the asset, and then we might be able to do that. And then it goes through a multi-week, internal collateral review process where we check the smart contracts, we check the liquidity, we check the legals, we check the market indicators, the market cap of the asset, and, sort of a whole range of different variables where most of our teams, our smart contract team, operations team, legal team, capital markets team are all involved with. And then, we can either list it or not. So LBTC, for example, is the latest asset that we listed. And then we obviously have limits in place, right? So we then say, okay, it can be a maximum of X percentage of the total collateral base, for example.
What is the typical loan duration?
Yeah, so it's typically 7 to 30 days and then open term. So that means that they just remain open until one of the parties says, hey, I want to close it out. And then, the clock starts ticking. And then it takes, anywhere between 7 to 30 days for the loan to be closed.
So what would be the liquidation criteria? So if it's open term, my understanding is like it just continues to roll over until one of the parties says like, okay, we're gonna make an action.
Yeah, correct.
So if someone was collateralizing LBTC and like they effectively, and they borrowed and they never hit their, liquidation collateral or liquidation LTV, they could keep that loan open forever. They would just continue paying that. But if let's just say Syrup said, oh, well, we need to close this loan, you guys would say at the end of this current 30-day period, we need to terminate this loan. Is that effectively how it would work?
Correct. And that can be from both sides, right? So let's say you would be a borrower, then, you could tell me like, hey, I want to close it in 30 days, or I could tell you to close it in 30 days, right? And sometimes the borrower also says, hey, I want to repay it in tomorrow. Is that possible? And then we always have the option to say yes,
right?
If we can obviously issue it out. But if it's a really high interest rate and we want to keep it on the books, then we'll just tell them that we maintain the 30-day close sale window.
Now, next question, sort of in the same vein, is one of the things that I think many people are curious about is rehypothecation. So this was a huge thing with FTX, a huge thing with some other major creditors. Do you guys rehypothecate these collateral assets?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We do indeed use some of the assets to earn additional yield. Right now, that is just limited to staking. So, for example, the Bitcoin, the PTS, USDE, it just sits in institutional custody. Mm-hmm. But for example, the ETH is staked, right, in wrapped ETH. And the SOL, so that's on page 1. And the SOL is also staked mainly into Jido SOL. So those are liquid staking assets that we can still liquidate in case we need to, right? So we
have I think has like a 7-day or even shorter than that 5-day unstaking period. ETH also relatively fast. So even if like if there was a peg issue, you could still unwind those relatively quickly. Now, does that interest rate go back to what happens with that interest rate? The interest rate of those staked assets?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you can see on the collateral disclosure, you can see the 2.68 APY.
Yes.
So that actually comes from the staking, right?
Right. Awesome.
Yeah. So we will pay.
Is this where the yield comes from? The APY, it's like 2.68% from the collateral, and then 7.61% from the loans, for a total of 10.28.
Correct. Spot on.
Oh, awesome. All right, that's really cool. Well, thank you for explaining that. Okay, so now, sort of going full circle, we have the TVL, we have the liquidity, we have the APY, but this APY is higher than the APY on details. This is like 10% higher. So what's going on with this APY?
For sure. Great question. So yeah, I mean, perfect. You already opened it up. So indeed, so this is the APY from the loan book, right? So the one we just discussed from the loans and the collateral. And then it also includes the drip rewards on top. The drip rewards is essentially our points program where we have seasons and every month is one season. And at the end of the month, you will get your tokens allocated. And since the MPL token is already traded, on exchanges, we can actually calculate the APY that you earned, with your drips.
Okay, wait. So the drips give you, like, they're effectively kind of like points that allow you to then get a MPL, so Maple token, I guess emission or distribution at the end of each season. Each season is a month long, is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
Now, there's going to be a Syrup token, though. So these drips don't get you the Syrup token. These drips get you the MPL token. What is the difference there?
Yeah, so in the end, they will get you the Syrup token, right? But it's just that the Syrup token is going to be migrated over from MPL. So
what does that mean?
One MPL is going to be 100 Syrup tokens. So you can still, by having your Syrup token allocation, you can still calculate sort of the current market value based upon the price of MPL, because it will be a migration.
Okay, so when the users are getting their MPL, is that already fully liquid?
Yes. Yeah. No. Okay. So the users will get the Syrup token, right? So it is not fully liquid at the end of the season. It's just that you get your allocation, right, of Syrup tokens, which will start to become liquid in December for early,
I see. Okay. So like currently you are getting Syrup at the end of each season. That has a 100-to-1 conversion ratio to MPL. So you can estimate the current value of that in the interim. Maybe there are places to hedge that if you wanted to just neutralize your delta on that. And then at the end of December, then it will become fully liquid, you're saying, because you will be able to either convert to MPL or there will just be liquidity launched for it. Is that the way it works?
Yes. Yeah. So the MPL token will fully convert to the syrup token. So you can
So
really
are you
think
guys
about it.
phasing out MPL entirely?
Correct.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I got it. So
Yeah.
there won't be
Yeah.
two existing tokens. There'll only be one token, and it will be the
Correct.
syrup token.
Correct. So everybody will go to the syrup token. Yeah.
Okay, awesome,
That's
cool. Now the syrup token, I imagine there's, it sounds like a governance token. Will
Yes.
it have governance rights only over syrup, or will it also interact with Maple in any meaningful way?
Great question. So it will indeed just replace the Maple token. So it will have full governance rights over the whole Maple and syrup protocol. And besides governance rights, we're also going to launch staking, where syrup stakers are going to participate in the growth of the ecosystem. And since we're generating significant revenues, we are guiding stakers to about a 10% APY for the first 3 months.
And so that revenue is going to come from Maple loans or syrup loans or both or neither?
Both.
Okay,
Yeah.
both. And so you said you're guiding people towards a roughly 10% APR on staked syrup. Will you guys? I mean, so that's interesting, right? You're going to have a token. It's going to have staking rights. Will there be any other like tokenomics associated with it? Will there be like locking or voting power or control over emissions or any of like the crazy V tokenomics we see? Or is it going to be as simple as rev share, governance, and the speculative value?
Yes. Yeah. So it will be as simple as staking and governance. Of course, governance has influence over what staking
Utility.
looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Governance also approved staking. So yeah, the DAO definitely has control over that. Of course, we also want to make sure that it remains organic and we can continue obviously growing the protocol like where we need.
Now, one of the questions, actually, I've been picking your brain about this in our private chats, which is the seasons, right? We have season 1, season 2, season 3. I think we're on season 4 now. And last season, which you guys wrote a really cool article about this. No, did I closed it. Darn. Which showed that like, oh, here it is. I got it. I was also talking to the Pendle team about this. They sent me this article. Last season, you guys had like a average APR of around 10% just in those syrup distributed. So 10% on top of, the organic 10% yield, so 20% altogether. And they did a breakdown, which is like the 180-day deposit lockup got a 15% boost. The average user 10% boost, the 90-day got a 9% boost, and then the no commitment, so it's effectively fully liquid, there's no lockup, got a 5.1% boost. Now that's big for season 3, but then you guys effectively saw a doubling of your TVL. So you went from, I think it was something around like 22 million to like 40, you probably even like probably 50 million at this point. I don't know. I haven't checked the TVL recently. You might know off the top of your head, but you more than doubled. So the yield farmer in me thinks, oh, well, if TVL doubles, then I imagine we're going to see yield halve. Is that true? Am I wrong? How does this work?
Yes. Yeah. So that's a great question as well. So, we are sort of guiding lenders to, strong drip performance going forward, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna halve. We also, our current view internally is that the Pendle market is a bit undervalued, right? Especially where, we would expect drips to land. So I think right now it's at like 15% or so. We would expect it to land quite a bit higher than that.
Yeah, okay. So one, I was wrong. You guys went from 45 million to 90 million, not from 20 to 40. My bad. Let me not undersell your numbers here. And then on the Pendle market, so I think what you're talking about is that there is a market here for syrup USD. See, am I on the right chain? Let's see. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So right now it's at like 14.5%. You guys are saying that you anticipate the end result for the user to be somewhere around 18%. So there's kind of like a 3.5% arbitrage between what you guys anticipate the inevitable yield to be for the 3x boosted USDC and what it's currently at. Now, you could do some fun math there, right? So let's just say it's 100 days away from now. There's a 3% arbitrage on that. So you'd get 3% ROI in 90 days. You could annualize that. You're going to get around like 10% additional yield, 10 to, it'd be like 10 to 15% APR, which is neat. It's a pretty cool speculative play. If you could leverage it, it'd be a lot more fun. But there's also the pools here. And the pools, I think, have been actually pretty high. Yeah, so 20% APY. Now, if that's like the base rate, the 20% APY, this is before the 3 times boost, which you think is going to be another, roughly maybe around another 8%. So that would put it at like 27%.
Right. It is. To your point, that is sort of what we are expecting at the moment. Of course, it always depends on, the price.
Can you promise? No, I'm kidding. I won't make you do that.
There's no promises, obviously, but
right.
It's, to your point, it always depends on inflows, on price, things like that. But this is sort of our expectation. And to your point, the 13.5, if that were to go to 18, the return on that would be pretty good. So we definitely see interest on that side, and we sort of see the market, figuring that out over time.
Well, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Then one of the other, actually, wait, no. Am I thinking about this wrong? If it is selling at 14.5 and it is, let's just say it should be 18, that's a 3% difference. Now that should be 3 out of 14. It shouldn't be a 3% ROI. That would be
correct.
3 out of 14 is roughly what, 22-ish%? That'd be a 22% ROI. 22% ROI in 100 days. That annualized is like 80%. Now I'm getting excited. Now I need to go back and redo that math. Okay.
Exactly.
Let me not do more math because then I'll dilute myself. But that does get exciting. So if you want to see all this math, I'll be doing it later in the dojo because he just got me excited after rethinking about this yield. Speaking of composability, because I just realized that because you have composability, I would anticipate you guys would also probably want to put this on like a borrowing lending platform so that people could take that 10% base rate, collateralize it, and then just, leverage it to the moon like I like to do with all of my Delta One assets. Is that on the roadmap for you guys? And if so, where would we anticipate seeing composability?
For sure. Yeah, great question. So that is definitely on the roadmap. So we're looking at Morpho, for example, and, launching there. And, there's also other options, right? So thinking about, think about a Sky integration or things like that. So that is definitely top of mind for us.
I think a lot of people are familiar with Morpho and they're familiarizing themselves with the protocol formerly known as MakerDAO. And with Morpho, it's an isolated market. You need a curator and you also need to seed capital. So how does a protocol seed capital for borrowers? And are you working with any particular institutional curator?
Yes. Yeah, great question. So we are working, we are currently in talks with some of the top institutional curators on Morpho. And the main thing that we're trying to do is that we actually plug into an existing vault, right? So instead of having to start from zero and just do a syrup USDC backed vault, I just plug into one of the existing vaults and benefit from all the liquidity that's already in there, while also diversifying the vault at the same time. Right? So it adds benefits for all sides. And then it allows the vault to grow as well. Because, all of these segregated markets, are ultimately not as great for liquidity.
So when you say plug into a pre-existing vault, can you sort of unpack the way that works?
Yes. Yeah. So for example, if you take the, I think you got the Steakhouse one. I don't know if you see
so
there.
Steakhouse, they have like the bull icon, right?
Yes.
I don't see it there. We also have like MEV, but if we go to ecosystem, vault listing.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically the way it will work is that, you got a vault and it has several collateral assets, right? So
let me see if we can find one with several collateral assets. Probably.
I think even that one, the one you just opened up, like the usual vault.
Wait, where
like
do I
70 million in there.
Ecosystem? No.
I think if you
I know there's like a vault pay earn. There we go. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, and you're saying Steakhouse.
That's USD. Here they go. Yeah.
There we go. These are a bunch of different types of collateral.
Indeed. Yeah. So here you can see. So here there's different types of collateral, right? So we would just be looking to get listed on one of those vaults.
And then
where
tap
there's
into
some
the
existing
pre-existing
different types of
liquidity.
collateral. Exactly. So we don't have to bring in all the liquidity. Correct.
Okay. All right. Awesome. And so you would start with some seeded liquidity and then maybe also attract some additional liquidity from institutional partners or whomever. And then me being a DeFi degen could go with like 95% LTV, leverage 20x and get like 100% on my stables.
Yes, that's
or something like
it
that.
would
Right.
unlock that possibility.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this is a question a little bit more esoteric for borrowing. Do you know or anticipate what kind of oracle you'd be using here?
Yeah, so we are probably going to use our own vault. So our own, like smart contract, the value there. So we are essentially
Okay,
a
so like an NAV
4626.
value, exchange rate, NAV,
Exactly.
not market rate.
Correct.
Now, is there even liquidity? So like, that makes sense, and I'm so glad you're doing that because we love NAV oracles, we love exchange rate oracles, fundamental oracles. These things protect users from liquidation, so that is a good thing.
For sure.
I myself was victim to a market rate liquidation, oracle liquidation this year, and it was painful. And I've only been using like fundamental ever since. The other question though that goes along with this is if you wanted to use market rate oracle, you'd have to have liquidity. Does liquidity exist for Syrup USDC or Syrup USDT anywhere? Like, are there LPs for these things?
Yes, yeah. So there's one LP on Balancer at the moment, but it's still quite small. So we are definitely looking to grow that over time. Right now, also our first phase was really just get the scale, right? Get to a couple $100 million. And then the next phase is really, now with the launch of Pendle, launching on a couple of these money markets, having it enabled as collateral, then liquidity really starts to become a need. We do have very strong primary liquidity, right? That we just walked through. So, there's sort of two options there. One is having sort of a buffer, a liquidity buffer of, let's say 5% of the pool, allowing for those liquidations. And then the other option is, to your point, having secondary liquidity. So it's definitely something that we are, building up over time. And, ultimately, of course, the goal would be to, have all those things fully enabled by secondary liquidity. So we can run, as an efficient loan book as possible with max utilization.
Right. The issue isn't that like you can't transfer to USDC or Syrup USDC in and out because you can use the native staking or lending mechanism through the Syrup front end. The issue is always liquidations. So for fast, efficient liquidations to occur, there needs to be effectively some like sort of decentralized on-chain liquidity that can like immediately be activated in the event of liquidation, right?
For sure.
Yeah, and a lot of protocols are running into this. So, you see Gauntlet, and there's another team that sort of works on these. They do like risk analyses, and they effectively like advise on, well, this should be your guys' LTV, or this should be your kink rate on your utilization ratios. And without a lot of liquidity, they can be pretty fickle with what they recommend. So,
for sure,
excited for your liquidity push.
Yes.
Definitely consider doing like what's that protocol? Merkle incentives on top of Uniswap, because I just love using Uniswap. But maybe we're moving towards a different, more decentralized future where we'll see more competitors. Well, outstanding, man. I have picked your brain for all things that like were immediately interesting to me or compelling to me as a yield farmer. Is there anything else that users should think about when looking at like Syrup, Maple, and like maybe the future of what you guys are going to do?
For sure. Yeah, great question. So I would say the token launch is obviously very exciting, right? So that's going to happen November 13th. The launch of the Syrup token where everybody can really participate. To your earlier point, we are sort of the fastest, lending protocol, at the moment, right? We're growing the fastest. So I think, we want to continue seeing that growth. And I think one of the main reasons is the institutional yield. Right? So it's super scalable. It's higher yield, it's fixed yield, so it really checks off the boxes for what users are looking for. So we just want to make sure we get more composable, there's more utility for the token. We start spreading in DeFi, right? You can do all of these different strategies that, you're alluding to. There's more liquidity, right? You can potentially take it to layer 2s. You can, automate things through Contango and protocols like that. Thinking about launching a vault as well, where we actually deploy into some of the DeFi strategies and abstract away all of the complexity for users, right? And they can just deposit into the vault and really put their Syrup USDC to work, right? As you know, one of the best yield-bearing assets in crypto. So yeah, that's all coming in the next couple of quarters, and then really in the long term, we see ourselves as the epicenter of on-chain credit, right? Credit is facilitated through Maple and Syrup.
So, I mean, that was a great ending, and a smarter interviewer would have ended there. But now I've got some more questions. One question is, you mentioned that this is really scalable. What kind of demand have you seen relative to your deposited loans? Are you up to your head in demand, or do you have to go and find demand? How does that work?
For sure. Yeah, so we always have demand, and at the same time we try to find demand, right? And the reason we try to find demand is because we want to get the best rates. So we are always actively sourcing deals. But if we got capital in, for example, yesterday I think we got about 10-15 million in deposits. We issued it out on the same day, right? So you saw today we only had 2 million idle, which came in just today after the last loan got issued out West Coast late last night, right? So we are able to issue these loans out on the same day as liquidity comes in, which obviously shows you the very strong borrower demand. And at the same time, we're actively sourcing deals to continue getting those rates higher, right? So, for example, SOL-backed deals are quite interesting because we can stake the SOL as well, right? And earn additional yields. So we're always looking for those. But yeah, at this stage, the bottleneck is on the supply side. Growing the amount of stablecoins, and we see very strong demand on the borrower side.
And I think you mentioned too that if ever you had such an influx of deposits, like if someone lent $1 billion, Syrup has the capacity to cap new deposits to maintain a meaningful APR or something like that. Can you explain that to me again?
Correct. Yeah. Indeed. So at some point during the cycle, if there would just be, to your point, like $1 billion that would come in overnight, right? Which is possible in crypto land. We always have the option to set a cap on the product where no new deposits could come in. And then, we can obviously maintain our strong APRs for our current depositors.
And I guess final question, which hopefully is easy. How do interest rates affect the APR on Syrup? So we have national interest rates. We're seeing rate cuts. We just saw a 50 bip rate cut. Do those affect what borrowers are willing to pay in any meaningful way?
Yeah, so at this moment they don't. 50 bips at this stage is pretty small. Let's say the Federal Reserve would cut rates by 5%, then obviously it would be it's obviously unlikely, but that would obviously have a meaningful impact. However, I will say that we do see more capital. If the Fed cuts
rates by 5%, I think everything else is going to go crazy. So
exactly. I mean, it did happen during COVID, right? Where they just got it 2.5% overnight. But I think so. But what we do see is more traditional capital coming in. So where traditional, in traditional markets, 50 basis points are a lot, right? So if you earn 50 basis more or less, that's significant. So we do see a lot of traditional asset managers and family offices and folks like that are now starting to look into crypto yields because they're obviously higher than in traditional markets. So I think that is the more exciting one.
Yes.
Where we can potentially get way more capital into the space. Because the main reason why rates are so high in crypto, across the board, is because there's a supply of dollars, right? There's just a shortage in the supply of stablecoins at this moment in time. And as more stablecoins start coming into the space, I think sort of rates are going to stabilize. And ultimately, all of the world's credit is actually going to run on the blockchain, right? So that's what we're working towards. That's another good end there right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that last bit there. So that is Syrup and Maple. Go and check them out. Thank you, Martin, so much for joining me, and for everyone else watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, Steven.